Welcome to the Autosportradio.com 2017 show. I'm your host, Don Kay. We are live from McGillivray Speedway, 30th and High School in the beautiful town of Speedway, Indiana. And for those of you coming to town for the Brickyard 400, make sure you make a stop at McGillivray's. They got great food, great service, and the adult beverages are ice cold. Tonight's Autosportradio.com 2017 show is presented by Honda and Honda HPD, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and Verizon IndyCar Series. A couple of things to mention in case you hadn't heard. Bill Simpson lost one of his sons, David. So we send our condolences out to Bill. I talked to him yesterday. He was in Charlotte. So I'm sorry to hear that. Something I didn't catch last week, but I do have now, and that is a young lady who's finally gotten to 21. Linda Mansfield had a birthday last week that I missed, so happy birthday, Linda. How many watched the Toronto race? How many liked the Toronto race? How many like the winner? How many like the pole winner? In case you have computer trouble like I do, and I did again today, I highly recommend you go to Computer Overdrive at Lyndhurst and Crawfordsville Road on the northeast corner. Talk to Jack. He can fix anything. You give him a call. Let him know you're coming. Number is 317-328-0766. And for those of you who haven't been to the Speedway Museum, you got to go. They got the A.J. Foyt exhibit. It's there until October, but don't dawdle, because you'd be like me and go, oh, no, I forgot. Get over there and take a look at it. It is absolutely spectacular. Now, my first guess. The man has probably put more miles on airplanes, cars, buses, trains, anything that moves, and anybody in a sport, particularly motorsports, no matter what it is, that hasn't heard of him has had their head in the sand. All I need to say is the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Please welcome Mr. Doug Boles.
I wish I got to be on planes more. Most of the time it's cars. In Toronto was a car, and I forgot it's 8 hours, so I left work late Thursday and couldn't make it all the way, so I stopped in London, Ontario, and then drove in, and then I got home at 4 in the morning, I guess Monday morning. Planes work better. I need to learn a lesson, but
well, it seems to me
something about driving that Chevy that I just can't stop driving it everywhere.
Can't they put you on they got a charter, can't you get on that thing?
I'm not really predictable in terms of my timing, so it's not a good idea to plan a flight around me.
Okay, I'll leave you out. You know, you have said early on that this job at the Speedway is a dream come true. Do you still feel that way?
Oh, absolutely. It is. Every day I walk in the Speedway, it's a dream come true. And like I think really what I've said is it's not a dream come true because you never could have dreamed that you would have had this job, right? So every day I get up, I can't wait to get in the office. I can't wait to think about how we can make it better. I can't wait to hear from customers and just try and make the Speedway better. And you know, today as I was walking out, I got a letter from a young boy who had written in crayon on a piece of paper, and he was upset with us because he loves IndyCar so much. And he said, I can name all 33 drivers, but my favorite are James Hinchcliffe and Tony Kanaan, but you got to make your toys better. They break when you play with them. And he had a picture that somebody had taken of his Hinchcliffe car with 2 wheels off it and the wing off of it, right? And so it's one of those things where that's just the feedback you want. You want to make it better. But part of me wanted to say, man, you should have seen my toys when I was a kid. The good thing is he must be playing with it a lot because he's doing like you're supposed to do with a race car. But he's going to get a couple new cars. I'll take care of him. But that's what I love to do is make sure we're taking care of that next generation of fans. And the way I fell in love with it, obviously, is because of Dad and his love for the sport. But then it was just playing with cars all day long, right? And all you could think about was cars. And I have a job right now where all I'm thinking about is, the Indy 500, the Brickyard 400, and how can you make sure that this racetrack's around for the next 100 years.
Well, it's a good thing you didn't mention to him, by the way, that the way Hinch's car looks in your garage, the way his car looked at one time before. So you pretty much simulated that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good thing you didn't mention that. You know, my hat is off to you. I'm not wearing one, but if I was, I would take it off. I think that what you have brought to the Speedway, I'm sure everybody here will agree with me, that it's never been done in the way you're doing it, that you're out, as you mentioned, and I know you did it because you called somebody that I know, that you call guys on your way home, and gals, ticket holders, and thank them for coming. And the guy that you called and I talked to, you talked to him for about 15, 20 minutes. You got his entire life history, then you had him arrested, which was a good idea. But you have brought something to the Speedway that's never been done before, and that's you're out with everyone. If somebody wants to talk to you, you're available. You'll talk to them. You got a complaint, you'll listen. If they're happy, you'll listen to that too.
Well, it's the only way we're going to get better, and unfortunately, I can't solve everybody's problems, right? So sometimes you end up with a customer who has an issue, and you can't solve it for whatever reason, or just because you can't do it the way that the customer wants. But I think at the end of the day, they're happy to have had somebody to listen to, and the highlight of my day is driving home and making those phone calls. And those phone calls range from somebody who's afraid I'm trying to sell them something and wants to get off the phone as quickly as possible, right? So it's just like, okay, thanks for calling, goodbye. To those guys that want to tell me their entire life story and how they fell in love with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, in particular the Indy 500, and why they continue to come back. And those to me, that to me just reinforces why I'm putting so much energy into it, is because we are, all of us in this room, that the people that come and listen to you talk every day or every week about our sport and about our facility, the passion we have for it, it's our job to continue it. We want the next generation to be there, and it is each of us in this room that pass it down to family members. We most of us got it from a parent or a grandparent or an uncle listening in the backyard on the radio on Memorial Day weekend. Couldn't wait till you could afford to go to the 500 on your own. And for me, the ability to say thank you and let them tell me their story really is the part of my day I love the most. So I can walk out of a day and be frustrated with whatever happened at the racetrack or whatever happened in terms of the way we're trying to operate our business. I can't wait to make that first call. And every once in a while you get somebody who's really mad, but most of the time, even if they're mad, they're happy that somebody just listened. And it's amazing how listening to somebody and maybe even explaining why you do something they don't like, at least then they understand why you did it, and you can carry on and keep a relationship going.
You borrowed not you personally, but Speedway borrowed, I think, $100 million from the state and made some changes. How have those changes been received, and has it been worth the effort and the time and the money spent to do it?
So the changes are going well, but as a taxpayer, the good news is that the revenue that we've created because of those changes is increasing, which is going to help us pay back the loan that the state has given us. So that's really the hope, that was going to work. The changes are fantastic, and the unfortunate part about it, it's a 108-year-old facility that still needs more. So now that these changes have worked, now we're trying to think about how do we continue to invest to make sure that we take that new change as the new foundation and build upon it. So every day for us is just trying to figure out how do we continue to make it better. We can't sit back and stop. Phoenix is investing $170 million in Phoenix over the next few years. Richmond just announced they're gonna invest in their facility. So in order for us to continue to be competitive from a racing standpoint, we're going to have to continue to invest in the experience for our fans. What we have that most tracks don't have is that history and tradition. So we can't go in and raise it and start over, because if we were to tear down the grandstands and start over, people would say, this isn't what I fell in love with. I'm not coming back. So that's why when you saw the new seats and the way we did the new roof of the paddock penthouse, it had to still be the same deck that people sat in when they first came. It had to have that industrial steel feel and that green that you expect at the Speedway. So you're not, I don't think, at least not when I'm around or when Mark Miles is around, or probably this current board is around, you're not going to see the Indianapolis Motor Speedway change and feel like a brand new modern stadium. We're going to feel like what makes us special, which is our history and tradition. And I think we did a pretty good job at that, and I think our fans think so. And we just have to continue to evolve and make those changes that continue to make it better.
I got a couple emails today, strangely enough, from people who say they sit in stand E. Ask Doug, what are they going to do in stand E? Are they going to improve it? Are they going to fix it? Are they going to do anything? I said, I don't know, but he's going to be here. I'll ask him.
So stand E, so one of the difficulties we have, this gets into federal regulations and the whole 9 yards. So our racetrack was built before the Americans with Disabilities Act was instituted, and one of the things in our new upper deck that we wanted to do was give somebody that had to have a wheelchair the ability to experience the best seat in the house at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So that's why we added all those elevators. It's ADA accessible right now, and we thought we were going to do the same thing with E-Paddock below and E-Paddock Penthouse above. But when you started looking at the cost, because that facility, it's so old, really the only way you could make it accessible was completely tear it down and start it over again. Otherwise, you were going to spend that $100 million plus just on E-Paddock and E-Penthouse to make it work. And for us, it just didn't make sense. So I think what right now, what E-Penthouse got the stadium seats. We actually added a couple of seats in each of the sections up there so we could give more people an opportunity to experience E-Penthouse. So E-Paddock, B-Paddock, and A-Paddock, which are the lower decks, but also really great seats. I'm hoping over time we can convince the Department of Justice that changing the seats down there from the wooden benches or the aluminum benches that they have down there, or at some level even folding chairs, that if we can turn that into a stadium seat, that's not a renovation that triggers having to tear it down and make it completely ADA accessible. What we've been trying to tell them as well, we weren't required to do as much ADA accessibility in the penthouses as we did, but we wanted to do that to show that we really do want to make it a better experience for everybody. So the challenge is some regulation that impacts what you do, and the minute you change something that's more than maintenance, you trigger that, and it's a challenge for us to get through it. And there's some older stadiums, that's why they just tear down and start over, because it's more cost effective to do that. And because history and tradition of those seats is so important in our place, we don't want to get in that position where we're doing that.
It's amazing. As many years as I've been around here, I drive by there and I still get excited. I don't care. It doesn't. I've done this 5,000 times. It doesn't matter. Just to be there, and the number of people. He had a granddaughter who ran the mini marathon. She said, one of the reasons I want to see the Speedway. At the end of the race, she said, "My God, is that place? I never realized you don't realize how big it is on television until you get there." Jeez Louise.
Well, you think about it. If your only experience is watching it on TV, you see a car go around in 40 seconds. And you don't understand the enormity of 2.5 miles or a mile long by a half mile wide when the cars go that fast. And TV, and especially on race day when it's full, it looks small, right? And so that's the thing you hear the most when people go in, is just how big the facility is. And from a maintenance and just upkeep standpoint, that's the biggest challenge, is how do you continue to manage and stay on top of that. But that's the thing you hear from everybody that comes for the first time, is just how big the facility is compared to what they expected it to be from what they saw on TV.
Another thing that amazes me, and this year I paid particular attention, I don't know why, the snake pit. Now when it started, I remember the old days. And when it was started a few years back, they had 5,000-6,000 people the first year. I think you had over 30,000 this year. And the thing that amazed me is they had the big sound control panel in the back, and there were people behind it because that's all the place there was. Now what the hell they looked at is beyond me. But the place was jammed. Obviously, that works pretty well.
It's the best marketing tool that we have for a young adult under the age of 30, and at some level, it's the best marketing tool we have, period. The number of people that come to the event that aren't necessarily race fans, but are experiencing the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, are experiencing race day through their eyes. Most of those people wouldn't even come on race day, right? So our hope is, like the old snake pit, those people didn't come for the racing. They came for the drinking and the partying and the mud wrestling and everything else that went on, the fire burning, burning cars and couches and things that happened back then.
Oh, really? Oh.
But ultimately, most of them grew up and said, you know what, I got a job now. I need to be responsible. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have kids, but this is what I do on Memorial Day weekend, and they became race fans. And that's our hope. And the challenge, and I've said this on your show before, the challenge for us is how do you convert them? And so this year we weren't 30,000. So we were 30,000, I almost said students. We were 30,000 young adults last year in the snake pit. This year we reduced it to 27,500 for a couple of reasons. One, we wanted to make the experience a little bit better. If you go out and see the space that we put that many kids in, because unlike the rest of us in this room, if we go to a concert, we expect a seat, we expect to sit and watch it. We'll stand up every once in a while when we know a song, but for us, we experience it completely different. They want as many people around them as they can, the least square footage per person as there is, and they stand the whole time. So you can get all those people in there, but we got to a point where we felt like 30,000 was just an awful lot of people. And then when you start thinking about the heat and all the other things, that, the drinking and all the things that go on, we wanted to reduce the capacity reduce the load on our servants who are in there worrying about the medical issues, the paramedics, the first responders really that had to deal with it. So we wanted to make that a little bit easier on them. And we feel like we've come to a number that feels pretty good in that space. So we were about 27,500 this year, and I think that's the number where we'll continue to hit unless we get to a point where we move the location. The challenge with that is it already is a problem from a music standpoint for the guy or gal who's sitting in turn 3 or turn 4 and is there for the race, and they have to hear that bass all day long. So we continue to figure out can we adjust that to make it better for the customers. Those are some of the complaints I'll get, right? The guy will say, I sit in turn 3 and I didn't come to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to hear Diplo or whoever it is who's playing their music and their bass all day long. And then we had the conversation about why it's important for the long-term future. And generally, they accept it okay. But I also understand that we need to figure out ways to limit that intrusion on the experience that folks have, especially if Jim Corneliuson's coming back to sing again. I want to make sure everybody hears that, right? I don't want anybody missing that. Angela Brown was awesome, by the way. So it is a great marketing tool for us. And I'm 50. I'm completely disconnected from that whole experience, but I'm also trying to see it through the lens of that's what that generation wants. And if I can get them to the Speedway, then we have to figure out how do we get them to stay long term.
Well, I'm kind of Autosport. I think should be happy. I've had 2 presidents and the CEO in the last 3 or 4 weeks, and I asked Mark when he was here. It was last week or the week before. When he first came, I said, that's a big facility. Have you ever considered doing anything other than racing? No, it's a race facility. Oh, really? Well, obviously there are other things that are going on. How is the concert? But now, I got to admit, I walked into the admin building, and right there is a list of who's playing this weekend. I said, who the hell is that? I don't know. But obviously the younger generation would know. I have no clue. But how is that working? Is that helping bring people in that might not come anyway? They come to see the entertainment?
Well, Snake Pit, which is a perfect example of a way that works. And what we're trying to do is take a page for the Brickyard. We're trying to take a page from the Snake Pit book and apply it to the Brickyard. So we've got Major Lazer on Friday nights that is the headliner, and the Chainsmokers, and I can't name a song that either one of them perform. It's Saturday night, but the Chainsmokers are huge, right? I mean, they are a really, really big, and they're less EDM, which is the music from Snake Pit, and a little bit more crossover, so they're a little more mainstream. And the idea behind that is let's begin to build the same kind of thing around the Brickyard. So I think our attendance for this year's music will not be Snake Pit-like attendance, but it will begin to move forward. And as we move the Brickyard to the fall, when we get people out of the heat, that's the one thing. Well, there's 2 things we hear about the Brickyard. The first one from complaints is, man, you got to fix the on-track product. And especially if you compare it to the last 5 or 6 years of the Indy 500, there's no comparison, right? So you have to figure out how do you fix that. And NASCAR has been creative in some of the things they're trying to do. The Xfinity rules package, this with the restrictor plate motors, hopefully this weekend is helpful. But moving into September gets our fans out of the next biggest complaint, which is the heat. The heat is just brutal. There's people that want to come to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway no matter what's racing there, right? But they don't want to do it in 95-degree heat on aluminum bleachers out in the sun. And so moving into October should get us into cooler weather. Cooler weather makes cars perform better, so that's a great thing. The idea that now we can be the last race going into their playoffs is huge. Right now our race really doesn't mean anything unless you win the race. If you win the race, you know that you're going to make it into the chase. You can get a few points in this new stage format, but for the most part, we're just like everybody else. So the last race will be a big deal for us next year, and then they're going to celebrate a regular season champion in Indianapolis, which I think is appropriate. So you celebrate a winner, the 16 men and women who are getting into the playoffs, and somebody who won the regular season championship. So now all of a sudden we've got a more compelling event. We still have to think through the on-track product component of it, but we begin to address some of the other problems. And music in the fall, we believe, will even be better than it is in the summer. So that music piece, while this year is sort of our trial at it, I think next year we'll begin to replicate more like the Snake Pit around the Brickyard because kids will be back in school. It's sort of the end of summer, and now we can say, hey, you want to begin your summer, you do it at the Speedway at the Snake Pit, and you can end your summer at the Speedway at the 400 Fest. So hopefully we can create some synergies there and pull it together.
Well, I couldn't, if somebody said, Chainsmokers did this recording. Okay, I'll take your word. I've never heard of them until I saw it on the sign. Who's that? That being said, you guys came in and you brought Mick Jagger and his friends in, and that was a huge thing. Are you guys looking at doing standalone major concerts like that throughout the year?
We would love to, but it has to be the right band. The Rolling Stones no doubt was, and the Rolling Stones was a perfect storm. It fit in while the budget was high, it fit in a budget where we felt like taking the risk to secure the band because we felt like we could sell enough tickets to at least break even, so we didn't feel like the risk was huge. The next part was they were on a stadium tour, and many of them were sort of outside stadiums, so they played in Columbus, Ohio, and other places, and it fit in sort of their normally arranged tour. And they didn't have any radius clause issues where they were playing in other markets and they couldn't play at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on a date that worked for us. So if you get all those things to line up, you can get it to work. So we last year Thought maybe we would have a chance to have Guns N' Roses play at the Speedway. Guns N' Roses hadn't played forever. You got Axl, who's a Lafayette native. We thought that might be a good one. And at the end of the day, the radius clauses with Chicago became a problem in order to get them to come there. In a little bit, they were priced like the Rolling Stones when they hadn't played in however many years, and nobody knew what Axl was going to be like. And so it ultimately didn't work as you started looking at the radius clauses. So it's a lot harder than you think, especially when the number of bands that you would bring there. It's a really narrow band in terms of the number of folks. We want it to be high level and something where you get people from all over the Midwest who say, okay, I have to go there. So the Rolling Stones wasn't just central Indiana. There were people from all over the Midwest, a lot of Rolling Stones fans who went to multiple Rolling Stones concerts that came. So that's the other thing. We want it to be special. And 50,000 people, for the Rolling Stones and no seats, right? Everybody stood. And that was the other weird thing about that. When we proposed to them about 18,000 seats and then everything else standing, and the band came back and said, look, we want this to be – Mick wants to get on stage and just see a sea of people standing, and that's the only way he'll come, and that's how come you saw that event as just a festival-like standing. So that's where us old guys had to figure out how to just stand versus have that seat that we're used to having.
Yeah, but see, that's how you made it work. You didn't have to pay the money to get the 18,000 chairs in there.
Yeah, we probably saved a little bit of money on that side, but on the other side, I think there's a lot of people who probably didn't come because they couldn't buy a seat.
My question has always been to the members that do this is you had the Rolling Stones, probably the number one rock group in the world. How the hell do you follow that up?
Well, that's the hard part, right? And so you look at during the Rolling Stones concert, of all things, we got a call from the manager of AC/DC who was interested in at least exploring, and the reason they heard is they had heard that the load in and load out was the easiest than anybody had had it anywhere, the way that we had it staged for them to load in and load out. And then ultimately, again, you get in those conversations and you start looking at their schedule and where it is and their radius clauses, and it just doesn't work. In the music industry, you take a Live Nation, for example, who owns Klipsch and all these other arenas, they'll go buy the Don K tour. And when they buy it, they're going to pay you an average of $3 million a show, and they know they're going to make money on some and lose money on others, but they know they've controlled you across the board. And then that's when you get into those radius clauses. So if you're in a radius clause, Live Nation's bought everything, and you're not going to get people to bands don't have the flexibility, and that's what happened with us with AC/DC.
The Grand Prix, is that in stone? It will continue on to open up May?
As far as I'm concerned, it should, and I think as far as our board is concerned, it should. We had a board meeting just a couple of weeks ago and talked about it. But the challenge for us as promoters, the 2014 race was the high water mark in terms of attendance. That was the first one. And then really, if you look at 15, 16, and 17, we've been pretty flat in ticket sales. And I've challenged our team. I had one-on-ones with everybody on my staff over the last couple of weeks to thank them for May. Sit down and kind of go through with them the presentation that Allison Mellangton and I made to the board, and then to talk to them about how we go forward. And one of the things we talked about in there is we have to, as an organization, grow the IndyCar Grand Prix. And that means we need to get the attendance up. We need to figure out how to get people there. The people that come love the event. It's a fantastic way to see an IndyCar race. And the drivers love being there. So for us, we think it makes an awful lot of sense to continue to do that. For the teams, it's an inexpensive way for them to have a race on their schedule, since many of them are located here. And if you're in the Indianapolis market and all you've ever known is oval racing, it's a nice way to see what the IndyCar guys do. Depends on how you define road racing, but 2/3 of the time of the year, at least a third of the time of the year on a natural terrain road course. So for me, it's one that the challenge for us is how do you continue to grow it? Like I said, 2014 was a high water mark, and then we've been sort of flat 15, a little below 14, but flat 15, 16, and 17. How do we make it better?
Well, in my humble opinion, most of the people that are there are because of you. Because you're out everywhere. You turn on the radio, sports talk, you're there. You watch television and news, you're there. You're everywhere. And I think what you've added, in my opinion, and I say I'm sure these people agree with me, has been spectacular. And I think that's what it takes. It takes you guys, you in particular, but others, the drivers and so forth, to go out and drum up the interest and let people see what an intelligent student of literature James Hinchcliffe is. Or, they got some fabulous drivers with great personalities. Let the people see who they are and get them to come and follow them. There's a whole team, but the quarterback is the one everybody knows.
Well, I appreciate the comments, but it really isn't about me. It's about all of us in here. I just happen to have been given this opportunity to be the voice for all of us, and the frustration we all feel when there's not somebody out there screaming for, come to the Speedway. It's the most awesome place in the world. We've all been there, right? And so for me, every day, I feel like I'm carrying the frustrations that all of us have is how do we promote, how do we get out there? Don't sleep. Go knock on the doors of the media guys. I write handwritten thank you notes to every media person that I can when they have me on the radio. I want them to know that we care and what they do helps us. So those are the challenges. So it really isn't about me. It's just about the passion and the care that I think all of us. These people come see you every week because they care enough about our sport, and that to me is what I just carry that. I'm blessed to have the megaphone, so I'm going to scream as loud as I can if somebody's going to give me the megaphone, and I'm going to continue to do that. And we do have drivers that are unbelievable. We have drivers that care enough and want to try and help. And I think I've been on since Texas last year. I mean, Texas last year, when it's raining and it's crazy, the next thing you know, drivers are in the grandstands talking to fans, not because some PR person told them to, but because James Hinchcliffe and a couple other drivers said, these people are sitting up here and we owe it to them. The drivers are the ones that decided to go up there. And my guess is there are probably some PR people that are going, don't do that. I got to go stand there with you, and they're going to pull on you and they're going to tug on you. And the driver's like, they're sitting here. We owe them that. So we're fortunate also to have 21 full-time drivers who care about our sport and are out there promoting it. And in a lot of ways, we're in a great spot with IndyCar racing, and it is because of the drivers, and it is because we have promoters, and it is because all of a sudden, the fans and the passion we have, where I think people are hearing it. In this community the last 2 years, whether folks are race fans or not, this community the last 2 years has, and when I say community, I mean Central Indiana, has embraced the Indianapolis 500, whether they attend the race or not, in a way that I think they used to in the old days. They were proud that the Indy 500 was here. And there was a period of time, and I loved Mayor Hudnut, and he did great things for our city, but when people were sort of offended and they didn't want to be known as the racing capital of the world, we want to be the amateur sports capital of the world, which is great, and at some levels we are. But organically and in our true DNA, we are the racing capital of the world, so embrace it and let's go. And we have a community right now that is behind that, and it's not embarrassed by it.
I didn't mean to imply that you're the only one that does anything, but I think you are the leader, and your people.
I'm probably
follow
too
you.
passionate about it. I mean, there are times in the middle of the night, my wife's waking me up saying, "Hey, you're talking to yourself again. Stop it." It's what I think about 24/7. It's the most important thing we have in the state of Indiana. I'd argue it's the most important thing this country has, and the history and tradition. And Carl Fisher was a promoter, and I think Carl Fisher would be really proud of the fact that we're promoting the place.
Well, now, it's a racetrack. It's also an entertainment center for music. But now it's an airplane place. How has that gone, and what does it look for? Are you going to do as good or better than last year? Because the people that went there thought it was spectacular.
I would predict it will be down a little bit from last year, only because every first event at the Speedway does great. And then there's some people that said, okay, I went there for the first one. I'm not really a plane guy. I'm going to move on. But I think our attendance is going to be real strong, and it's going to be a sustainable event and one that people enjoy. And we're a racetrack. That's what we are. But in order to continue to be competitive and make investments, we have to find strategic ways to generate more revenue to do that. So that's why the right music event makes sense. Something like Red Bull Air Race is not on the ground, but it is racing. Carl Fisher had some air meets at the Speedway. I spoke to the Antiquarian Society in Culver, Indiana, about Ray Haroon and how Ray Haroon, he built 2 airplanes on his own, actually flew to Culver and thought at one point in time that he was going to teach flying at Culver. So there is even there's flying in our DNA, so that fits very well, and the connection with Red Bull, and especially the international exposure that Red Bull brings to Indianapolis Motor Speedway works well. What I like better about this year's event versus last year, all year internationally, they're talking about crowning a champion at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and there's not a better facility to crown a champion. So that, from an international standpoint, I think that raises our stature internationally for us as well. But you have to look at those events in a way that you want events that make sense. So we're hosting the SCCA National Runoffs in September. Lisa Noble, who was the head of the SCCA when we first started these conversations, her husband built the motors when I first started racing Formula V. Back in the day, I was racing Formula V. So we had a conversation one of the Kroger Super Weekends on the roof when the sports car race was going on, and she said, "Would you ever host an SCCA event here?" And I said, "Well, no." We're not a regional racetrack, and at some level, we're not even a national SCCA racetrack. I said the only thing I'd consider, Lisa, is if you would want to bring the runoffs here, because the runoffs to me rises to the level of what the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is about. So that's the challenge. How can you add events that are fitting of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway? We could have a race there's the NASA, SCCA. You go through all these different acronyms of people that do club racing. And we could do those every weekend, but that's not what we want to be. Even the SVRA weekend this year, having 2 weekends probably was too much. We need to focus on one special weekend, not 2 diluted weekends. And we learned a little bit of a lesson there, I think this year on how to do that. So that's the challenge. We want to add events, but you want to add events that are additive to the brand, don't take away from it.
Well, I find it interesting that you started out following in your dad's footsteps. The judge.
I'm still following my dad's footsteps.
Yeah, well,
I'll never fill them, but it's fun to continue to follow him.
And you went to law school, which is no walk in the park. I have to say, you've heard the saying, I'm sure many times, everybody has, if you see a lawyer talking, his lips moving, he's probably woofing. Well, there's three lawyers that I know, when they talk, they make sense. He's one, his dad, Judge Boles, is the other one, and Jim Boles is the other one. When Jim talks, you better listen. But I got to assume.
Did I ever tell you my Jim Boyle story?
No.
I worked for Mayor Goldsmith for a period of time back when Busch Stadium when the Indians built their new stadium. The city was trying to figure out what to do with Busch Stadium, and Jim Boyle's group, along with Tony George and others, were proposing to make it into the racetrack that they ultimately ended up making it into, and as they were walking through that, it was back in the day before I barely had a pager, I think, back then, and the cell phones were those brick cell phones, and Jim had made a proposal, and we were waiting for the 3 folks somebody wanted to make a soccer stadium out of it. Somebody, I can't remember what the third one was, and then there was the proposal to make a racetrack out of Busch Stadium. And we were having a big meeting where everybody was going to present like a couple days later. And Jim was trying to find me and couldn't find me. So Jim called my parents' house. And my mom answered the phone. And he said, Mrs. Boles, this is Jim Boyles. And my mom said, hey, how are you doing, Jim? Blah, 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 blah. I'm looking for your son. And immediately my mom thinks something has happened to me, right? So she says, well, what's going on? She said, well, can you have him call me? And he wouldn't tell her what. And so my mom is panic calling because she said, if Jim Boyles is calling you, you're in trouble and you're probably guilty. And so we went through this whole thing, and I'm trying to explain to my mom, no, I'm fine. It's really related to, but she didn't believe me. So yeah, when Jim talks, people do listen, and including your mother.
Well, I didn't mention that you started out as a PR man with Mr. Goldsmith when he was a Marion prosecuting attorney, and when he got elected mayor, he hailed you with him, and that's how I got to meet the mayor. I met you at 16th Street Speedway, actually. I said, I want to get the mayor. Well, he's here. That's fine, but how do I get him? Well, see that guy over there. What's his name? Doug Boles. Okay. I talked to him, and about 3 or 4 weeks later, he was here. So when you talk, things happen as well. Well, I'll tell you what, I am pleased that you had the time to stop by here. I know it's easier to do an interview on the telephone as you're riding around. It's not so easy to get here, but I appreciate you taking the time. I think your job that you and the staff and everybody, I think what Mark is doing is remarkable. You know, as you know, I'm sure you heard when he came on, they said, well, he's not a racer, what does he know? You don't have to be. How many guys have been selling shoes, had a shoe company, and they took over CEO of a bandana company, and they turned it around? So,
and that's the magic of Mark. You know, Mark isn't a racer, although he's learned it really quickly. But what Mark is, he is good at deploying people in positions where they can excel and giving you the tools and the support that you need to do your job, and the correction, too. He has great instincts. And so he's one of those people that as we come up with ideas and move forward and we feel like we have the perfect idea, he'll come in and say, well, what if you thought about it X, Y, and Z way? And typically you end up better after you've talked to Mark. But the best part about him is just the way he just deploys his people. I mean, look at how Jay Fry is flourishing at IndyCar, right? I mean, there's somebody who we brought in really on the sales side, and Mark started looking at him and goes, man, this guy really ought to be dealing with teams and promoters, and it's where his experience is. And, you know, that is that's the talent Mark has. He has the talent to assemble amazing teams, and for him to be able to recruit Allison Millangton to leave the sports corp where she's been forever and get completely out of her comfort zone to come work with us makes us all better too. She's the best ally I have inside of our organization because she doesn't understand our sport at all, but she understands customer experience. She understands big events. She's just we have just unbelievably I'm happy to be the dumbest person at 16th and Georgetown because we have some unbelievably bright people, and they put me in my lane, and I feel like I can excel. But that's the magic of Mark. He can see people and go, okay, this is your lane, this is your lane, this is your lane. We're going to cross over in these places, and go. Here's the goal, and go get it done. And hopefully you guys can see that when it's here, because there is part of us as race fans who are like, okay, this is an outsider dude. He doesn't understand our sport, and like I said, he has learned it. And he is really bright, but his talent is just putting people in and saying, "Go fly," and it's a pleasure to work for him. And I probably felt the same way when they brought Mark Miles in. I was like, okay, I don't know what this is going to mean for me. And within a couple weeks, I realized this is the best thing that's ever happened to me since Steve Goldsmith.
Well, you got to look at his career, what he's done, playing tennis in college, Wabash College, which is a real national tennis team, I'm sure. Takes the WTA and takes guys that were making a couple $100,000 a year, made them multimillionaires, built it from a national to an international sport. So he knows how to do it. He knows how to wheel and deal. And I think what he's done, and I agree, I think Jay Fry is doing a phenomenal job. What they're doing, and the 25th, upcoming Tuesday, next week actually, testing of the new car. Not the new car, the new bodywork on the car. So things are going well, I think. And everything's not going to happen overnight, but I think people's attention is being drawn to what's going on, the competition that's here, not only at this Speedway, but, I mean, the last 4 or 5 races here have been spectacular. Mm-hmm. And the place is growing, the things are getting done. It's interesting, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me as always, and it's always good to see familiar faces, and thank all of you for spending the time listening to this guy every week, right? But the passion you all have and the passion he has is why our sport is so special, and we need more Don K's. We need more of all of us to continue to grow this sport. So thanks for evangelizing like I do every day. I know you guys do the same thing, and it's fun to see you guys at racetracks, and it's just going to get better. I think we're in a good spot.
There's a number of people here that are going to Mid-Ohio. There's some sitting over here that are going to Watkins Glen and to Pocono. So they do leave town and go follow the races. And I got news for you. These people are here more to see you. They hear they say, oh, him, he's still. Oh, Doug's there. Let's go see Doug.
It has nothing to do with me, but thank you very much. And while you're putting plugs in for racetracks, don't forget the local tracks, guys. I mean, the best place that we can support grassroots racing is the Bloomingtons of the world, the Gas Cities of the world, the Terre Hautes of the world. And I know for some of us that are IndyCar fans, we forget the roots of our sport. And the best time I've had over the last 2 or 3 years is just reconnecting with the people that really care about our sport and reminding them that we care about them. Because that's where that next generation of sort of the lost fan that really ought to be coming to all the events that we have is. And I've been spending a lot of time there trying to connect with those folks. And we got to figure out where the next Brian Clausen is. How do we get that next Brian Clausen to run the Speedway? And there's a whole bunch of things we're working on. And but yeah, the Mid-Ohios and all those are important. But we got a lot of great racing here in our backyard. And Indiana Sprint Week was awesome. Midget Week was awesome. We got the 4 Crown over in Ohio coming up the day after my birthday, and there's all kinds of good racing, whether you're an IndyCar fan or not.
Well, go over to Eldora.
And we got a Brickyard this weekend. I can't forget to remind folks.
It starts, the trucks come in, Thursday? They come through town.
Well, the Hauler Parade is Friday this year.
Oh.
So we worked with, are we screwing you up on time?
No.
So.
I know Larry's a little bigger than I am. He might poke me in the eye, but he says okay.
So, yeah, I'm taking your time, Larry, sorry. And Larry knows short track racing better than anybody. So, I mean, he'd be the first guy to tell you it's really important as it relates to really growing the sport. Friday, the Hauler Parade is in the town of Speedway on Friday. So this year we worked. I'm on the NASCAR Promoter Council, so they have 10 folks that are on their Promoter Council. It's really to give NASCAR feedback on how they can make the racing better for our fans. And one of the things that we've talked about across the board is in the old days, especially around the Brickyard when it first started, you couldn't turn a corner in Indianapolis without seeing a driver or a show car or some sort of an appearance. And over time, that sort of has disappeared. So one of the things we said, we got to figure out how do you re-engage the drivers with the community. And they came to us in November or December and said, hey, we have an idea. Would you be willing to take your Cup weekend and go to a 2-day weekend? But what we'll do in exchange for that, we'll send 9 drivers into your market on Friday, and you can use them however you want to help promote. So we said, yeah, let's try it. At this point in time, I'm willing to try anything. So we've got 9 drivers that'll be in the market promoting. 7 of them will be on Main Street as part of the Hauler Parade, which really has never happened before. Ryan Reed and the Lilly guys are going to do some stuff downtown. Actually, Ryan Reed's going to be at Speedway Indoor Karting on Thursday and going to race with some fans, which is kind of cool. So beginning to build a connection to those fans. So that's Friday. You know, obviously the music Friday night and Saturday, and then Saturday and Sunday, the Xfinity race Saturday and the Cup race on Sunday. So the nice thing about NASCAR is they actually are listening to us and trying to help us. They've sent Chase Elliott in last week or week before to help us promote the Brickyard, and we got the ability to choose who we wanted. And while Dale Jr. would have been really cool to bring in because it was Dale Jr.'s last event, to me, I wanted to bring in the one of the next superstars, because the only way this sport's going to grow is if you connect to the next young guy. And Bill Elliott had Chase. Bill won the Brickyard, sort of like Dale Sr., and you know, it'd be awesome if Dale Jr. would win this weekend. But I wanted to begin to get somebody in this market that people get to get used to and say, okay, that's the guy that Indianapolis. He's driving Jeff Gordon's car. He's got Bill Elliott's DNA, and he came in. We did some axe throwing and helicoptering around the city and go-kart racing, and is a great guy. So NASCAR is really trying to help us. So hopefully we can grow that. But that's going on this weekend, and my plea right now is if you love the Speedway, just come on out. Even if you want to just come out, you know, Friday for practice or Saturday, just try and stay connected. And next year, I can't wait for September because I think a lot of changes next year. I think it should be a good event.
Well, obviously, I can see why you talk in your sleep. You talk all day, so you just continue talking. And does Beth reach over and go, bam, shut up?
No, the challenge is Beth talks more than I do.
Oh.
So the challenge is how do we hear each other, right? Because neither one of us, actually, I listen when she talks. That's what a good husband does, right? So you do. It's just in my sleep when I'm talking that she has to get me to stop.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, as I said. It's always great to talk to you, and who knows, down the road 6-7 months from now, I'll try again.
That sounds good.
The president of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Mr. Doug Boles.
Thank you.
My next guest is on his way up. I will mention that if you need a good car, a Chevy car, you got to go where the best price is. The best price are in the country at Sam Pierce Chevrolet. Just take I-69 north to exit 34, go south 1 mile, and you won't miss him. And one thing about Sam, he doesn't stand behind you when you buy a car, he stands beside you. You want to get it in your mind what it's like to take what these drivers see when they drive the Indy cars? Why not sign up and get a ride with the Indy Racing Experience? They run here at the Speedway throughout the summer and around the country. If you want to book a ride, you can go to the IndyRacingExperience.com and look for a date that works. And when you sign up in the promo box, put SJ1, and you get a 50% discount here at the Speedway. It's a great ride. It's a lot of fun, and you'll understand what it is that makes these people want to drive these cars. Stitches 2 is in Gasoline Alley, just south of the Speedway, where you can get embroidery done for anything. Hats, shirts, shoes, jackets, it doesn't matter. If you need it done, you can get it done. Call Fran. Her number is 317-271-3444. And if you are a vintage car fan, you've got to go to svra.com and subscribe to the Vintage Racing Quarterly. And for those of you who remember the Trans Am series, they got a Trans Am Today magazine that just came out, and it is spectacular. So check it out, svra.com, and subscribe to the Vintage Racing Quarterly or the Trans Am Today. It's time for insurance. You know, the insurance commissioner always tells you it's when you go time to renew, check around. Make sure you're getting the best price for where you are. I've done that, and I'm still getting the best for Mike Pardee at VP Insurance. For your car, your home, or if you got a commercial property and you need insurance for it, he's the man. Give him a call. The number is 317-248-0070. Get a quote. You might be surprised like a lot of us were. He'll help you out. He's located at 5004 West 16th Street. That's Mike Pardee. 317-248-0070. And if you have a 9-year-old kid and want to give him a ride, how exciting it is to be in a 2-seat Indy car. If you're under 9, go sign up for the ride, and when you're done, mention my name, and the picture that you get is free. Now, the next gentleman joining us is back at it again. He has been a race car owner, race team owner, general manager. He spent a lot of years, as Doug pointed out, in the short tracks around the Midwest. Always been winning. He teamed up with the owner of his company who was supposed to come here tonight, but something happened and he was unable to make it. But he assembled a team a couple of months before the 500. Got on the track, hired Gabby Chavez to drive it. The Indianapolis 500, they finished 9th. I know guys that ran here 15 years didn't finish in the top 15. Then they went their next race, Texas, and finished 5th. Next stop, Pocono. Where could that be? Could be on the winner's stand. Who knows? Please welcome the General Manager and Director of Competition for Harding Racing, Mr. Larry Curry.
Thank you. Thank you, Don.
How difficult was it to perform putting together a team so quickly? I mean, did you have your pick of guys, or did you have guys that were available that you knew about and knew would be winners that you're looking for?
Yeah, I started talking to guys back in November about who I thought I could get into this program, and with the understanding that we were going in on a lot of what ifs. First of all, we was going to run the 500, but we were only going to Texas if we got out of Indy clean. So who knows how Indy was going to go, but luckily for us, we got out of there clean. And then Texas had the same challenge. If we're going to go to Pocono, we had to get out of Texas clean. Well, you all know that watched that race. We got a lot of luck. I'll take it. And we probably legitimately had a top 10 car. Do I think we had a top 5 car? Probably not. But I've been there when I'm getting the white flag with Tony Stewart to win the race in 1997, only for the engine to blow up. So there was ones that have gotten away from me over the years that I thought I would have gotten. And then, so I'll take this one. I'll take the getting a little bit of luck and getting there. So,
what made Mike Hardy, who owns Harding Paving that I'm aware of, and the Harding Group, what made him want to get, because he's been involved in racing, he's supported, he's sponsored teams and so forth. What made him want to take the big step and own a team?
Well, evidently he had this on his mind. That's what Tyler Smith, who's an executive vice president there, told me. He says, you may not know this, but he said Mike hired you back a year before this to see how you two would get along, because he wanted to go do this IndyCar thing. And after the Indy 500 in 2016, he said to me up in the suite, he said, you like doing this, don't you? I said, Mike, I've done this a long time. And he said, well, let's go do this together. And, of course, the first thing I reminded him was, it's very expensive. And he said, I never ask you that. I ask you if you do this with me. And I kept thinking, okay, we're up here. It's May. Everybody's excited. This will be gone by June or July. Next thing I know, I'm over in Chevy's truck meeting with them during the Brickyard to talk about the possibility of us having an engine. So it just never stopped.
What's his, the man is very successful, has a very successful business, and has spent a lot of time and a lot of money involved in racing. What's his love for racing? Did he ever drive that you're aware of, or does he just like the sport?
No,
like
he just, I think, growing up around here and seeing it, and I guess his dad, Fred, back quite a few years ago, had their name on a car that was owned by Man. And so Mike, in the back of his mind, said, I'm going to do that. And the one thing that you'll learn about Mike Harding is when he puts his mind to something, it happens. He does it. And he's grown his business. The business is incredibly big now and getting bigger constantly. So his goal is, the anticipation is that he wants to run full time next year, and maybe not only with one car, but with 2. So
are you
that's a big undertaking.
So are you out knocking on doors, raising funds, or if you got some people that are helping out? Obviously, I would assume
He is probably the biggest advocate on that. I stay in, as Doug had said earlier, I stay in my lane. I know what I do well, and I know what I probably don't do well. So I let the guys that know how to raise the money go do it, and then I'm dealt my hand is trying to make sure we perform as well as we can. So hopefully with the 2 performances we've had, it's helped them a little bit, I hope.
Are you still operating out of Dennis Reinbold's garage?
No.
Oh,
After Indy, after the race, we stayed in the garages at Indy and prepared the car for Texas, just like we all used to do back in the day. We went down to Texas and ran. And then Dennis, or Mike, had gotten with Forrest Lucas and Morgan and put together an arrangement for us to work in Morgan Lucas's drag race shop out in Brownsburg. So that's where we're at now.
well, that's a nice facility.
It's I said, what's not to like about that place? That place is unbelievable. And I'll have people call out there, and I'll be on the cell phone. I'll answer them, and they'll say, where are you at? I said, I'm out in the shop. They said, it's so quiet. And it is, because where we're at, on the extreme other end of the building, is where the fab shop is. But, they sold all their drag cars, so they're not physically doing any racing out of there. So it's a very pleasant place to be, I'll tell you that.
Now, do you work for Harding Paving? And are you in the office, or now you head of racing?
I haven't been in the corporate offices up off of Hague Road since January. I had an office when we were at Dennis's, and now I've got an office here at the Morgan's shop, and I go over there maybe once every couple weeks for a meeting or something, but other than that, I don't go over there.
Now, do you have a full-time crew working on the cars? I mean, you're only going to run 3 times. Do you have a full crew? Of course, you don't need that many.
I'm number 5. I have 4 other guys. I have a crew chief, 2 mechanics, and an engineer, and that's it.
And how did you hook up with the engineer?
He happened to be my son.
Yeah, I know.
But, he was working. He had been working for A.J. Foyt for a couple years, full time. And when this opportunity came up, Mike Harding told me, he says, I want to hire your son. And I said, that's between you and him. And I said, so I wasn't even in on the negotiations. All of a sudden, I'm told, hey, Matt's coming to work. I said, that's great. I mean, I was happy, but I didn't want to be involved in that, man.
Now, you did a lot of racing, as Doug pointed out, in the short tracks. And I had seen you at the tracks a lot. Do you think that what Tony's original plan when we started Indy Racing League was to be able to bring some of these drivers, like in the old days where Foyt and Unsers and John Cock, all these guys came from the short tracks and got to IndyCar, got to Indianapolis. Do you see that possibility still working, or we have to go to the ladder system, and most of the drivers, for the most part, are foreigners?
Well, I think that there's some guys that hopefully will get the opportunity. And I told Tony George this when I worked for him. I believe that Tony had the right plan. I still believe that. And I think that the plan, I'd like to see that play out, is to say, hey, guys, we got a series. We'd love to have you come run with us, but here's our package. Come on and do it. Because, that's when we didn't have the $1 million engine leases and so on and so forth. And there was a lot of, people got to look back. Even you can say what you want to say about the IRL. But I remember when me and Tony Stewart had our little team, some of Dick Simon's cars didn't make the race at Indy, not because there was only 33. There was like 37 or 38. There was a bunch of guys went home. So it wasn't that we didn't have cars, because we had plenty of cars. And that come with more opportunities. So.
And I think it's a shame that, like Dave Darland should have been here. He won the super license and got the test in Hemmelgarn's car a couple of times. He got the license but never got a ride, and that's a shame. I'd like to see that change, because there are some good drivers. I'm still not happy with with Chip taking Kyle Larson, because I think Kyle would have been spectacular in Indy cars.
You know, Tony Stewart told me when he was still driving, I was at the Speedway at a tire test with him. And I just asked him point blank, I said, Tony, do you think Kyle Larson is that good? And he said, Larry, he said, if I could have hired him, I'd have got out of the car this year. So he would have been out of the car a year prior to if he could have gotten Kyle Larson under contract.
And Kyle's done awful well. Won a World of Outlaws event. He won short track events still, and he's won a couple of NASCAR races now. So he's moving along. That's too bad. What got you started in racing? There wasn't any jobs available, so you said, "Hell, I'll go get into racing." How did you get into
I
it?
actually worked full time, believe it or not, for General Motors right out of high school. My father and my grandfather had both retired from there. And after I was there about 6 months, I said, I can't do this. I can't come in here and put the same bolt in the same hole 56 times an hour and do that. I just can't. So I was a drag racer. I built my own cars, my own engines and all that. And then I realized that even when I was winning some of those, that there was no money to be made there. So I decided to take a swing at this and came up here and knocked on doors. I didn't know anybody and ended up getting to do a little something, and the rest is history.
If I remember right, you with this guy, what's his name, Stewart, you were talking about, won an IRL championship together.
Yeah.
So you've won your races, you've won your championships. And the thing that I got to say that impressed the heck out of me is what you guys have done in a relatively short period of time between when you really got a team organized, got up in a shop, got moving, and came to the Speedway and finished in the top 10. If Mike Harding wasn't impressed with that, he had to have been sleeping that day.
Well, I hope he is, but I also hope that, you know, I've got a lot of respect for Dale Coyne.
Oh, yeah.
And my heart hurts for what he's been going through this year, but that's what I try to keep saying to Mike Harding. There is still a part of this that will always be, you got to have a little bit of luck. And there's some times when you get a stretch of bad luck. And when you do, the owners that are really committed keep going, bad or good. You always worry that when you have a lot of success early, like I set up Jim Hall's last new team. Went to the first race of the year in Australia and won it. Brand new team, out of the box, all new crew, and won. So then it became like, that's what we ought to do every week. And sure, you want to win every week, but the reality is this is a tough group that you race against in this series.
It's fun. Are you happy with the progress that IndyCar has made over the last 3 or 4 years?
I'm really happy to see this new bodywork. I have never, ever been a fan of those rear bumpers, as I call them. I just don't like it. To me, I always felt like we were racing some kind of sports car or something. And so I'm happy to see them gone. I can't wait for next Tuesday when they go out and do a little bit of this testing to shake these cars down to see what it's like. But so from that side of it, I think they're trying. I think they realize that, I remember the first race one of the first races that they went to when we went to that system, it was at Long Beach, and somebody came up, or it might have been Marco coming up on somebody else, and he hits that thing. It still launches the car in the air. So I'm thinking, what did that fix? In other words, it's supposed to be to eliminate wheel-to-wheel contact, but when you hit it, it still took off like a rocket. So,
well, the interesting thing, at least for me, was I had Jay Fry here last fall or sometime last year, and I said, you know what I don't like about the car? That rear bumper thing. He said, I don't either. It's gone, and it is.
yeah.
And he said, teams, and you probably know this better than I, teams have spent millions developing. Honda and Chevrolet has invested millions in the aero kits, and there's engine manufacturers looking at us, but they don't want to spend their money on that. They want to develop the motor and then come
Sure.
and run. So he said, that's out. We're going to change it. We're going to make it different. He's done that.
Yeah.
I mean, everything the man, and I said, you know, IndyCar grew and started on ovals. We need some more ovals. Well, since that time, he's put 2 ovals in.
Yeah.
Of course, Gateway, we'll have to see how that track holds up, but at least he's got them, and Gateway is all gung-ho for this thing. They can't wait for him to get there.
Yeah, no, I think he's doing a good job. I think I've had 2 or 3 meetings with him, and I legitimately think that he listens to you. And if he thinks that what you're saying is ridiculous, he'll tell you. He'll look at you and say, Larry, there is no way in hell we can do that. And but I think he's given it an absolute shot. I think one of the big challenges they have as a series is on the road courses, and I don't have the answer for it, is some of the races are very boring. They're, as much as, trust me, there's one thing that my wife knows my DVR set on. I tape every single drag race that's on television. I tape all the IndyCar races or qualifying. And I did used to tape all the stock car races, but now that Tony doesn't drive anymore, I don't. But anyway, it's hard to stay awake sometimes on the IndyCar on the road course deal. It really is. And I know that the series can't survive with just all the ovals. I understand the importance of Long Beach and St. Pete. Those events have become festivals. If you went around and really looked close, you would see that when a lot of those parties are going on in the infield, there's nobody watching the damn cars. Everybody is there for that. But that's what makes the event successful. The people come for the parties.
I think that at Long Beach you could run RC cars and they'd still draw a crowd.
Yeah, and Doug was 100% right. I used to say that years ago, that whatever they do at the Speedway, you can rest assured that for the first time it will be successful because it's there. Everybody wants to be involved in an event that is there. So that's a no-brainer. I mean, it is.
Well, I'm not a big fan of road racing either, but you go to Mid-Ohio, I don't care what they have there. They draw a crowd.
Oh, yeah.
They will draw a crowd.
Yeah.
Watkins Glen, we'll see how they do this year if it comes up where it should and could. I'm a little disappointed in Pocono. A friend of mine called me from New York, and he said, did you know there was a Formula E race? I said, yeah, I happened to see it, a little bit of it. He said, we've heard it for 3 weeks. It's been on television. It's been on every talk show, every sports talk show. It's in the papers. I said, what have you seen about Pocono? Nothing.
Yeah.
Really? Well, that's amazing. I wonder why not so many people there if they don't tell people it's there.
Yeah, no, I heard the same thing. It's funny you bring up that Formula E race, because I was channel surfing, and I came across it.
Yeah, so
And I didn't even know they were having a race there in New York. But it seems to be something that's catching on. It reminds me of when everybody complained about the turbine when it ran here at Indy. Those things are just as quiet. I mean, you can't. They said the mechanics have to be careful because when they're coming in the garage area, nobody even hears them coming.
Well, I've said that if they ever come and run at the Speedway, first thing people are going to say, turn the PA down. It's too loud, because the cars don't make any noise. And there's a veteran sitting over talking who was at the Formula E race in New York. She came all the way from Le Mans and brought all her knowledge to New York for the Formula E race. She said it was wonderful because she could talk to everybody and she didn't have to shout.
Well, I remember clear back in the day, I'm kind of dating myself here, but when Andy Granatelli had Parnelli driving in the turbine and people were complaining about it, he said, what do you want it to sound like? He said, I'll make it play the national anthem or the Star Spangled Banner every lap. I'll make it, I'll make it happen.
You were around as I was at that time with Andy, and you look at what he did at his time. He was so far ahead of anybody. It was unreal.
Unbelievable. And that's one of the things, Don, in my career that I've never worked for Penske, but I worked for Patrick. I worked for Jim Hall. I worked for the Granatelli family. All those guys that were icons in their time, and was very fortunate to get to do that. And of course, then here towards the end of my career, I went and did a couple races with Foyt, and so I got to go down to beautiful Waller, Texas, and get to hang out with him for a couple months, and that was a lot of fun too.
Did you like the chicken fried steak?
Yeah, there's two places in Texas that I worked race teams: Jim Hall's in Midland and AJ's in Waller. Both of those, the best places in town to go eat were the truck stops. Both of them. So
what are you looking for in Pocono? You got the cars obviously ready. What made you hire Gabby Chavez? I mean, it was a good choice, but what attracted you to him?
I don't know. I just looked at his record, and number one, you looked at he didn't have a tendency to crash a lot of cars. And the guy, was Rookie of the Year in his first Indy 500 in 2015. He was Rookie of the Year for the entire series the same year. And he never was a guy that qualified on the pole or did this or did that. He was kind of a 10th, 12th, 15th place guy. But he brought the thing home. And what I saw out of him in Texas solidified that 100%. Because we're there running, it's about the middle of the race, and you can see the storm brewing. It's coming. There's getting ready to be something. There's a lot of people getting impatient. And I saw him get in, and then he just, without me saying a word, he just pulls back out, sits there, runs, and sure enough, in like 3 laps, here's this big mess. But very, very smart guy, very patient guy, and doesn't get rattled at all. God knows that we got to work on our pit stops, but even when we had he'd race his butt off, and we'd be up to 12th, and pit stops are over, and we're 20th. And we're like, here we go. I'm sorry, man. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And it reminded me of his demeanor a lot of how Tony was. Believe it or not, when we had Tony, if we screwed the pit stops up, he'd tell me to call the leader and let him know he's on the way. But he never lost his cool. And so from that side of it, in other words, Gabby's everything I thought he would be. And I think he's going to be around this series a long time.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people are wanting to see Harding racing around a long time. Watch when the Pocono race comes up, car number 88. That's the one they got. Harding Racing. I'm sorry Mr. Harding didn't make it, but I'll keep bugging him.
I am too, and I want you to keep bugging him because Mike is an interesting guy that I would like everybody to get to know and hear from. He's very passionate about this racing thing. Is pretty much overtaken him, meaning now everything he does on a daily basis has something to do with driving this race program forward.
Well, that's good.
So,
and the series could use it, another 1 or 2 cars, and Juncos is likely to join next year, so that could be as many as 3 cars join. That'd be good. There's a lot of good drivers around, so it should be fun to watch Pocono.
No. We're planning on. We think we've got a good plan for there, and we want to try to do a little better qualifying deal there than we did in Texas. But at the same token, I just keep reminding the guys I'm not as worried about where we start as I am about where we finish. So just focus on the big apple. Don't worry about the small thing. I said, once they drop the green, nobody will remember who was on the pole. So.
Well, you also might remind him that one of the all-time greats was never a super qualifier, Al Unser Sr. He'd start in the middle of the field, and he'd be limping along, come to 15 laps, 20 laps from the end, and say, where the hell did he come from?
Yeah, I used to tell people, I mean, a lot of times you would not even know he was in the event.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, here this guy is, and threatening to win it.
Yeah.
So.
And strangely enough, he did on occasion. Well, I wish you nothing but the best. I thank you for taking the time to come here. Tell Mr. Harding that I will be bugging you, and you'll get mad and say, all right, you got to go there because he's driving me nuts. Plus, now I know where your office is.
He sent me a text, and he says, don't be mad. And I said, I'm not mad. I'll just get even.
Okay. That was funny when I called you and I said, is he able to come? He said, well, you told me, well, he spends a lot of time in Florida. This time of year, this is when he's busy.
Yeah, no, he was in Florida until sometime today. But before I answered you, I asked him specifically, and he asked me, he said, well, what is this? And I said, it's the same show that me and Gabby were on. And I said, you know, Mark Miles has been on there, Doug Boles been on there, Jay Fry's been on there, all these guys. Okay, yeah, let's do it.
All right, reminded me, said that. We'll talk to you maybe
No,
after Pocono.
I've got it on a text. I've got that in writing that he said, yeah, let's do it.
Well, we wish you good luck. I think your choice of a driver is outstanding. He's going to be a good one. Why he didn't have a ride up to now is beyond me, but you got him. And he can win for you, I believe.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And you know, if we can come out of this where we've done 3 races in our opening year and we finished all the laps in each race and we would be in the top 10 in all 3, I'd be the happiest guy in this bar right now.
Good. Good luck to you.
So that's the goal.
Keep your eye on it. It's a local team from Indianapolis, Harding Racing, car number 88, driver Gabby Chavez, the team manager and director of competition, Mr. Larry Curry.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Now, I've got a couple of feelers out for a couple of drivers for next week, but I haven't heard back yet. But as I keep reminding you, although my computer took a dive today, but it's fixed now, I hope. Go to autosportradio.com, the website, and click on Auto Show and see the guests. When I've got them, I'll post them. But if somebody, the 1 or 2 that I've talked to can make it here, they said they thought they could, you'll enjoy this one. So until next week, Don K. saying thanks for watching on the YouTube. And we're working on getting a live stream on Facebook too, incidentally. We get that accomplished. For watching, for people coming in, thanks for being here. Till next week, Don K. saying good night. See you next week. You seen that show yet?
Huh?
You seen that?
No.
Exhibit? It's spectacular.
I need to go see.